Well, hello there, you two. Got the lovely Brown family and JR Steps iPad ready to roll. Hi, Emily. Calling in from home. Nice, JR, you're in a different spot, different than I've normally seen you. Where are you calling in from? Oh, hold on, you're on. There you go.
I'm calling in. I'm in Fairbanks, which is some 4.5, 5 hours north of where I'm normally. So have a personal matter that I need to attend to with just wanting to be there for this young man. As a matter of fact, the man that I baptized at a camp.
Yeah.
And so we got to do more than just say amen, baptize him, then let him go. There's got to be follow-up. And
Yep.
so I'm here to follow up.
Cool.
So need to be here to follow up. So
that's awesome. Well, good.
Anyway.
On the road then and moving along. How long will you be there before you head back home?
Just spending the night and then turn and burn. So catch the next flight, headed back down south. So
good.
Yeah.
Good. Emily, catch us up. What's been happening in your life lately? That's okay.
Sorry, being mama for a second. I needed the baby spoon. Yes, well, if the chaos around you can't dictate the season we're in right now, things are just crazy, but good. Yeah, family life wise. So my husband, Will, he just started teaching, and so he's now teaching. Okay, he's now teaching from 8 a.m. till 4, and then he drives to another city and teaches a night class. So we just have to get through August. So he's gonna do a drive-by dinner here in about 45 minutes.
Oh wow!
Bless you. Meal. So we're trying to knock it out. But it's good. So that's our life season right now. A little bit busy. Yeah, ministry-wise, stuff's good. We the renovation project that we had raised money for back in December for children's ministry, finally breaking some ground this week. So we have the carpet coming in today, and the paint, they've been painting, and so that's exciting for this week, picking up some more stuff. With Big Mops fundraiser on Friday. So we're doing a kids night thing where we're giving moms and dads 2.5 hours of relief. Go and do what they need to do, and yeah, we're watching babies. So yeah, busy season, but good stuff right now.
That's awesome. Thanks, Emily. JR, besides going up to visit your friend that you're with right now, catch us up on what's been happening in the last couple of weeks' time.
So we had a state youth convention. It's called Fusion, Alaska. And the Baptist folks, they put that together, and we have our top artists come in each night and lead worship, if you will. And so and they have breakout sessions, and it's been going on for 16 years now. And because I was involved at the wedding, I was not able to attend Fusion, but a young man by the name of Brandon Evans, I think you'll hear about him in the future if you don't already know this young man. So much potential. Awesome. Anyway, so he took over for me in doing that while I had a wedding, and probably one of the most, it was a private wedding. It was, I can't describe it. It's something that I've never been a part of before, and I don't know that I'll ever be a part of again. Something as intimate as that. So
that's cool.
Other than that, just getting ready for the fall schedule, and new pastor may be coming up here to take over an existing, before this place, it's close to being a legacy. And so a legacy.
Yeah.
And before it's totally dead, I'm trying to get some new life into it and trying to speak into those folks. And it's like they know they're dead, but they don't want to give up. They're, I'm like, I even spoke to the pastor. What are you willing to do? And I said, he goes, to save this, what's left. He goes, I'm willing to do anything. And I said, even step down? Crickets.
Yeah, that's the.
Yeah. Yes, I'll step down. I'm like, okay. So I move forward. Now two new families happen to come by. Now, like, okay, I'm back on track. I don't need anybody. Anyway.
Yep.
Oh, regional pastor stuff. You know what I'm talking about, man.
I do. Yep. I just got back from, I know Emily heard a little bit of this earlier, but a coastal tour. So got to go, this is the farthest churches for me, JR, about 2.5, 3 hours away.
Okay.
I know. Sorry, you chuckle at that. The others are, within about an hour, 15 hour and a half would be the furthest besides that. Others are, I've got a church that's 15 minutes away too. So but I took a trip over to the coast and took that week's time frame, visited and preached at a church in Santa Maria on the coast. And they've got a co-pastorship there. Previous regional pastor is one of those co-pastors, and so talked with both of them. And, it's just interesting to hear, again, kind of where they're at season-wise in their church and what God's doing there. I got to visit with 3 pastors that have been on my roster, but I've never gotten to meet before. And so one retired pastor, one guy that has never really led a church in our region, but got ordained, and got to hear his story and catch up with him. And another guy that used to be at a church, potentially some bad relationship stuff happened, and he's not been in one of our churches for a while. So some of it was like, hey, I need to know, are you going to stay on the roster? Are we going to keep you credentialed? What's your vision? So there was a lot of that. And then dropped in at a visit at a church in Paso Robles on the way home. And I dropped in intentionally. I told the pastor I was coming at some time in the future, but I never dialed in on a date because I really wanted to see it for what it was. And there were 4 people there. The pastor, 2 of his sons, the pastor's 81, 2 of his sons, and then a friend of one of the sons. And so it was interesting, a good connection, good to connect with the other sons. So that's one of the churches that I'll be working with, in some ways that you were talking about for the future. So just interesting. And I just I had a vision for, planting churches on the coast. It's a right place. If I were to look at, just even in the flesh, where's nice weather in Central California? What are places that I love to visit? Like, oh man, I'd want to plant churches here. And I just noticed, like, man, it would be great to be able to see, if I had 5 families that would be interested in planting churches, I would love to see something like that happen. And I think, I was mentioning this earlier today too. I think that they'd probably be a very different church plant than the traditional, probably more like a missional community, like what we're reading about, more like a house church. I think that would probably be more effective and sustainable because I think it would have a longer start rate than others. So, but that's a little bit of catch up for me. So, all right, well, here's where we're going to go today. I didn't hear from Pastor Dayton as to whether or not to expect him, and I didn't hear from Pastor Paul either. So we'll move forward and jump in, and we'll welcome them if they come on board. So what we're looking at today is Emily's going to do a review of the semicircle. That was a new tool that we just taught last week while you were gone, JR. So we'll do a review of that. That'll give us a good chance to be able to catch up. And then from there, we'll have full discussion around all of that. Then we'll look at the scriptures. We're looking at Luke chapter 4. Really what we're looking at is like, how did Jesus live this sustainable rhythm of life? And how did he make that happen? So we'll look at his rest and his work. That'll fit into the language that Emily's going to lay out with the semicircle. And then from there, if we get to it, we'll go to the questions. But given our context, it may be that we stay with those three things happening. So Emily, we'll hand it over to you. Go for it.
All right, so I'm going to do my best to use the tools appropriately. Starting right now. Let's see, how is it going to pull it up? There we go. All right. So looking at Jesus, not just in who he was and knowing about him, but can you guys see the whiteboard first of all? Okay. So looking at Jesus and who he was, but how he lived his life and the way that he lived his life. He gives us that example in John chapter 15. So I can get that on there. I will. In John chapter 15, where he talks specifically about the vine and the branches, and this relationship between abiding with the Father and in relationship with Father, and a time of fruitfulness and of work, and how those two rhythms work together in the way that he lived his life. So we have a time of abiding, spending time in relationship with the Father, and then we have a time of fruit. There we go. So looking at these not as separate things as much as being connected in the center here. Using my tools, doing my best, guys. All right.
You're doing great.
All right. This relationship of them being connected and like a swinging, a rhythm of spending time abiding in with the Father, just as he did. He only did what he saw the Father doing, which means spending time with him. And then a season of fruitfulness, of works, and what is produced out of that time of abiding with the Father, and then going back, this swinging rhythm. Also during this time of abiding and fruitfulness, there can be pruning. So in this season of fruitfulness, you might have fruit that's produced, and then some of those fruitful branches get pruned back. I can't get the thing to swing again, but swinging back into this season of abiding after out of pruning. And again, where's my text? And then bringing us back into this fruitfulness. This isn't a word that's like explicitly used in the scripture, but it just ties in based on our knowledge of farming, that when things are connected, that they grow when they're treated appropriately, when they spend time. So this idea of, again, I'm not getting this to swing like I want it to. There we go. I'm gonna just draw a new one. Nope, not gonna work. Go away, ignore that. Oh, ignore that one too. Yeah, so as we abide and spend time, as he would abide and spend time with the Father, that would be time to prepare him for then this growth, and fruit would be produced, and then again cutting back on some of that fruit, so then he could spend time abiding and spending time with the Father. So that is a messy example of the way that Jesus lived his life, and this through this abide and fruit pattern.
Nice. Do you mind putting it back out for me so I can?
Yes, I didn't know I didn't mean to do that.
That's okay. And I should be able to do some drawing over the top of it too. Oh, it went away.
Oh.
That's okay.
All right.
Let me try to, here, let me open, since yours is gone, Let me put one up here and put some of those same things back in it. You guys can see my screen now. Okay. So yep, you've got abide, which is in the text. You've got fruit. Oh, come on now. And then you've got the bridge between them, like you had said. They're not opposite from one another, but there is a tension between the two of them. You've got the movement swinging back and forth. And then just to kind of convey it, usually, Emily, this is what I'll do too. I'll draw something in there. I know you had some limitations with the tools right there. So I'll hand draw that one in there so that it's not a straight line, but a curved line. It gets the full semicircle in there. And then, great job. You put the word prune over here, and then you put the word grow over here. So let me just pause there because that's basically what you had in the presentation, and we're right back in there. JR, let me turn to you. Any thoughts or questions as she's built that out about kind of what this is trying to say and all of that? Any clarity that can come your way before I move forward?
No, it's that's what she has put out. That is, I'm all over it.
Okay, great. Good. Excellent job. So then let me give you some feedback, Em. So yeah, well done. I know you're using the tools that way, and I know then too, one, I like the way that I'm watching you do imitation. So I can hear my voice, I can hear my structures in there, all of that. I want to commend because that's a process of learning and growing. I know that you've seen this. I don't know that I've ever seen you teach it before. So for me to be able to see, here's the first time Emily is teaching the semicircle live, and then not only teaching it, but using the technology tools. Just well done. And, even using the way that I'm swinging that, arrow back and forth to demonstrate that. I do think using the technology, that's a helpful way to convey it. When you're drawing it on the whiteboard, sometimes it's hard to convey the movement of the pendulum swing on the whiteboard. So just well done in that regard. Good use of laying out abiding and fruitfulness, getting the pruning stuff in there. And then even I could hear exactly the language that you've heard from me about growth. It's not in the text, but it's there. So just good substantiation in terms of presenting all of that. Then second thing I'd commend is well done in operating under pressure. I mean, I get it. I see your head turn from time to time when we're on call because you're mama on duty and you've got Lucy there and you've got Anna. So I appreciate that, like, when you're under pressure and now your microphone's on, Anna's potentially talking in the background, you've got all these distractions, you didn't get frustrated and give up. I like the way that you continue to persevere. And so, oh gosh, okay, let me scratch this, hide this. I actually really appreciate that you just kept going in there because it worked. And then on our end, man, we've got grace for you. So not only are you presenting an excellent job, but you're really giving us a visible demonstration of what perseverance and life as a mom looks like. And so I appreciate that and I want to value that, okay? Let's see. Here's one on the critique side of things that I would bring to the table. When you speak about pruning, I think that you're right in the ways that you said it, pruning the fruit, because the text, directly states that. Jesus says that the Father prunes all of us. And so it's not pruning in terms of correction, although sometimes it can be correction. It's just pruning fruit. If we go and we accomplish anything for the kingdom, usually what happens after that is it does get pruned away. We don't get to hold on to that win for the rest of our lives. Those tend to become idols. And so there's this pruning away. And I think what's happening is the text even states that it says he prunes us for greater fruitfulness. So even the branches that produce fruit get pruned for greater fruitfulness. In that case, it's not always about correction or discipline. It's about him, this is where the pendulum swing, teaching us that our value doesn't come from what we produce, but who we're connected to and abiding in. So that was slight correction in there. I get it that you had, a time crunch in hearing and learning all of it, and then all that you were presenting right there too. So I think that's the main stuff. Give me some feedback, Emily. What are you hearing in there? Anything that I can address further about all that?
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to add more examples for myself in this of like just life examples. I feel like when I've used this illustration, I've used it based on like a life example. But I was pretty distracted. I'm sorry.
No apologies there. I get that. Yep. And I think that's where the fruit and the pruning examples could come into play. So if you just lay out a pruning example from your own life, brilliant, and that usually helps illustrate it. Because that is somewhat in the teaching and demonstration of the text and then of the tool. That is an area where I think it can come across, not in what you said, but in how I see it presented. It could be confusing to other people. I don't know if I cut you off if you were going to say one other thing in there.
No.
Okay, great. Here's then the follow through. So here's where I would land the plane with a shape. So you've got the shape up there. What I would usually do, I put it here in the middle. So what is our weekly rhythm? What is our daily rhythm? And what is our monthly or seasonal rhythm? Because if we're called to abide and remain, but bear fruit, if we don't have those weekly rhythms, which Jesus talked about as a Sabbath, daily rhythms, which we're going to look at in the text today in Luke chapter 4, of being with the Father and then going to produce fruit, and then really monthly seasonal ones, which you can kind of see in the text of scriptures, but we know that we need that retreat refreshment time to be able to go bear fruit. You know, that's where it really gets practical at that point, beyond just here's what the text says, here's now where, usually where this turns into probably the most painful of all of the life shapes that exists, because it crushes us. Like, my life is out of order, my weekly rhythms, usually this conviction comes over us because we live in a culture that values doing and fruitfulness more than abiding and rest. So, all right, both of you, anything that we can discuss further about this just to make sure we've got our heads on straight around the tool, the text, the application? Okay. There are more components that can be taught around this. I'm not going to try to dive into it right now. You can go back into the book of Genesis and lay on the creation order and how God created us. We're created in the image of God to be in relationship with him. So you can put relationship on the abide side. And we have a calling on our lives to be fruitful and multiply. You see that he says that in that creation order, and to have dominion. So we've got a responsibility. You can put that on the fruitful side. So you can really lay covenant and kingdom, invitation and challenge, relationship and responsibility right over those. They fit kind of, as like nesting dolls back into the wider context. The other thing that you can do going further in Genesis is you can talk about how God did give Adam and Eve the call to have dominion, and that happens on day 6. But then day 7, which is their first day on the job, he tells them to rest and to honor the Sabbath. So it's interesting. You see this principle that oftentimes we'll say is that we're called to work from our rest, not rest from our work. And it sounds like semantics and just a play on words, but it's actually pretty darn deep. Because that's what you see God do. He says, I've given you a job. I want you to work. It honors me. You're my representative while you do it. But day 1, come on over here. Be with me. Don't go produce a single thing. Because this is where your identity comes from. Now, go out and work for 6 days and then come back. So he gives that weekly rhythm where they're working out of their rest. Whereas usually in our culture, we're running into the weekend, trying to rest out of this really busy day. And that usually kind of makes a bigger difference in there. So there's more that can be taught, but that's kind of the basic principle that I'd love to be able to pull out in mind from there. All right, I'm going to take that down. Let's take a look at the scriptures. Luke chapter 4. If there's anything that comes along, I know in some ways that it's relatively newer content. So if there's anything question-wise that comes up, I'd love to unpack that further. All right, Luke chapter 4. This is verse 38 to 41. And in Luke's gospel, Jesus has begun his public ministry in the beginning of chapter 4. He announces that Spirit of the Lord is upon me, what he's going to go do. And then now we're seeing him do it. So we're going to watch that on display, what he's doing in his public ministry. But what I'm really going to try to highlight is how he goes about doing it in a normal, everyday human life. Like he still sleeps, he still rests, he still eats. He does those things that humans do. He doesn't become this cyborg version of a human, which I think oftentimes gets communicated in church circles. Have you ever heard this phrase? I never take a vacation because the devil doesn't. And we use pride and arrogance to communicate this, like, I'm on duty and I'm devoted, which it sounds really good, but I don't see Jesus, the living example of God in flesh, live in those same ways. Now, he did hard work. He did hard things. There's suffering that he embraced, but it wasn't the suffering of an American, like, I work 87 hours a week and I feel good about it because next week I'm doing 120. He had this different life, and I think that was part of the gravity of what people liked about being around him. So here it is. Here, I'll let the text kind of speak. Verse 38, after leaving the synagogue that day, Jesus went to Simon's home, where he found Simon's mother-in-law very sick with a high fever. Please heal her, everyone begged. Standing at her bedside, he rebuked the fever, and it left her. She got up at once and prepared a meal for them. I'll pause there. So he's already in motion. He was at the synagogue. That was his regular rhythm, like a good Jewish boy. He was well honored for whatever reason in his own hometown. They allowed him the privilege to be able to read the scriptures. He's not just a flunky, like he's respected and honored in his hometown. As he reads that, he says some crazy things. This scripture is fulfilled in your presence. So he leaves from there and he goes to this home, to Simon's home. When he gets there to that home, this is just after church time frame. Maybe it's lunchtime. Maybe they're having, potluck and all that. That would kind of be our context. It ends up that Simon's mom is sick, and everybody has heard his teaching. There's been some demonstration of the authority and power he carries. And so people are asking him to bring the kingdom where he is and to heal this woman. He does it. He rebukes the spirit. Notice, by the way, that he rebuked the fever. So he didn't pray for healing. He rebuked the fever and commanded the fever with authority to leave, and it listened and obeyed. And I think it's funny that he objectifies a fever. You know what I mean? He turns it into an object. It becomes an it. You fever, get out of here. And it leaves her. She gets up at once and she prepares a meal. So now the potluck is continuing. Mom's there. People potentially witnessed it. So he's continuing to do this movement of work. As the sun went down that evening, people throughout the village brought sick family members to Jesus. So now what started as a message now has been a demonstration further of the authority of the kingdom is drawing more and more people in. We would call this revival. Like if this happened at one of our Sunday services and healing happened that brought in all these other people who are now wanting to respond and they're getting healed, we would literally be saying, the third great awakening is happening. That's what's taking place here. And he's doing all that. He's, these people are bringing their family members to Jesus. No matter what their diseases were, the touch of his hand healed everyone. Many were possessed by demons, and the demons came out at his command, shouting, "You are the Son of God." But because they knew he was the Messiah, he rebuked them and refused to let them speak. So another beautiful picture of Jesus using the semicircle. He's bearing much fruit. He's, kind of in the subtext, he's been with the Father, he's been with the people of God, but it's massive production time. Demons are being cast out, people are being healed, and then look at how it rolls in from here. Early the next morning, Jesus went out to an isolated place. This is abiding. He's moving differently. He's not looking to build a crowd right now. He's looking for quiet, stillness, intimacy, and connection to the Father. The crowds that were there last night searched everywhere for him, And when they finally found him, they begged him not to leave them. Again, I think if that happened in our day and age, we had just had this massive revival breakout. Now here I am spending time reading the Bible and connecting with God and with my family. That's usually what it would look like for me and my normal stuff. And people are knocking on my door saying, hey, we've got more sick people. We want you to come back out. Like, I know how my flesh would be responding in here. This is to that pruning question you were bringing up. My flesh would tend to, and I have to wrestle with this, find identity in what I produced and go, I am pretty important here. But Jesus is detached from that. He's safe in his identity. So they begged him not to leave, but he replied, I must preach the good news of the kingdom of God in other towns too, because that is why I was sent. So he continued to travel around preaching in synagogues throughout Judea. And I think many of us would go, what? You walked away from the opportunity of a lifetime. And I think about, man, the crazy way that I continue to ram my head up against this driven lifestyle, you know? And man, my Lord and Savior did all of that work. He's driven, but he's not driven to a detached. He's not driven to get an identity. He's driven and he listens to what the Father says, and he lets the Father give those audibles moment by moment. So we see his weekly rhythm on display of Sabbath, but we also see his daily rhythm on display as he has these rhythms to abide with the Father, but then go produce much fruit. And he lets the Father prune, and there's massive growth happening in a sense through him, and even Scripture declares in him that he grew in a sense in obedience. I can't remember the text where it says that. It sounds crazy, almost heretical, but there's growth happening all around him. So what are you guys seeing in the text, or any comments kind of about what I'm sharing here in the rhythm that Jesus is living into?
Just that idea of it coming out of a place of abide, I think is so rich, so good to hear that. Especially too, because we're reading Gospel of the Kingdom, and just learning this new concept of really of a future kingdom and the fullness of a future kingdom, and recognizing that while my heart wants present kingdom, lives in present kingdom so much, and recognizing that idea of like, yeah, being, because I think through all of this, seeing the pride in myself of like wanting to work, do whatever it takes, right? Do whatever it takes to see massive amounts of fruit. But knowing it has to come from the Father, and I have to recognize, even if something is good or something looks fruitful, looks like the Father would produce it and it would be fruitful, does not necessarily mean that it is of the Father, and to learn to discern his voice in that. So that's,
or like in the case of this text here, or that he wants you to stay and keep doing that same thing. He may have a new word, and I think sometimes our own desires and inclinations could lead us astray. And I think that's where, we've got this three-pronged enemy, the world, the flesh, and the devil. And the flesh, plays into all of this stuff, even as we're pursuing kingdom pursuits. Yep. I think, too, just to add into what you're saying, Emily, is that kingdom fruit doesn't come necessarily from striving. And I think maybe if you really define this word, maybe it falls apart, but there's this striving, and then there's just receiving. And usually kingdom fruit comes from receiving, because we show up to the table empty-handed and we leave the table empty-handed. It's not ours from the beginning. That's that verse in there where he says, apart from me, you can do nothing. And I think, man, I've spent so much of my life trying to prove that verse wrong, and it's in rest and remaining that our strength comes from. And it's so counterintuitive to the way our world works and the way my flesh works. JR, what are you thinking about as you see that text and reflect on it?
I'm definitely seeing what you pointed out earlier in the daily, weekly routine, and and not departing from it. It's when we start varying from the routine is when things tend to run amok, so to speak. But I think probably one of the most, not that any aspect of it is any more powerful than the other, but they all have to happen. There's that time where you've got to, where he is casting out the demons and that, but then there's that time that he has to be in a solitary place. And I think for me, getting into the solitary place is probably the most challenging part. If truth be,
I hear you.
That's just me. All right. So
I think that's all of us. Yep.
We don't look at. I think we don't look at the solitary as being as fruitful as. You don't really see fruit from being in the solitary mode, if you will, And so I think that we need to, in reading this, I see that each aspect, the daily, the weekly, the monthly routines, how important each of them are, and that one should not override the other.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Let me even I'm going to add this in here because it fits in like what you're talking about. This growth is a lot like root work, and you don't see it. It's frustrating for personal growth purposes. I'm abiding, and let's say I'm developing weekly rhythms of rest, and I'm doing that. You don't always see the growth of it for a while. It doesn't produce the fruit for a while, and that can be very frustrating because, again, not only are we this culture that's working really hard, but we expect things to be really fast too. And I when you were talking about abiding, in there, and that it's hard work, and this is where our strength comes from. This is where the power comes from, is from there, and all that fruitfulness. So just to layer that in there, that a lot of times it's invisible and it's root work. Anything else, guys, from the text?
I was just thinking too, I don't know the context of this, but just with that idea of like the root work in there too, because like for me, like in finding this daily rhythm that we've been doing, just this daily rhythm of abiding, and this idea of then also choosing to see fruit in it as well. Like for me, because I just want to see fruit, and I struggle with that. Like I want to see it right now, right? No. But choosing then, like, Lord, I want to see, the fruit in this and the grace in that, because I think there is a choice too of like, by spending time abiding and in His Word, there has been little things that it's like, yes, I choose to see that because I've been trying to hear you, just those little things, not necessarily the big seasonal fruit, but like making that mental choice.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I think too, in like what you're saying and what I'm hearing JR saying, the challenge of abiding is that sometimes just the simple practical details come into play. So maybe we learned from somebody who was like a mentor of ours along the way, and journaling worked for them, and they taught us to journal, and we did it, and it was good and helpful, but it doesn't really fit us. Well, sometimes what happens is we internalize, well, this is the way to grow, and we try to grow in the ways and abide in the ways that others abide. And I think, honestly, there's a lot of different ways that we're designed to abide. You'll hear this. JR, I'm sure you hear this all the time in Alaska. I connect with God in nature. I feel so close to Him when in fact, you said that not too long ago. You had all these pictures of you with fish, and like, I connect with God here. And we're wired for that. And some of us more so than others. Like my mom, like may want to go camping, but it's because the family is there that she wants to be there, not for the camping itself. And so she can appreciate it. But if getting out in nature and connecting with God that way was the only way she would feel like a failure. Whereas she's a really strong intellectual. Like, she loves to read and dig into more things. She's going to write notes and, journal and do all of that kind of stuff individually and a lot more with her mind. And my dad is not really like that. My dad is not much of an intellectual. He gets frustrated at me, like, you make things way too complex, Michael. Like, it's way simpler than that. And I like the way what you're teaching. I'm not against that, but and he's like, it's just way easier than what you make it sound like. And so there's a simplicity to how he approaches it. But again, to that idea that if my mom's way was the only way, he's a failure. And so I think there's a way that, like, we need to know who we are, how we connect with God, and usually rest. Let me put this back up here too. We've got to broaden our definition of kind of rest and abiding. And so rest is, what do I do where I feel refreshed? What restores life to me? And what recreates maybe joy or peace with me? And the crazy thing is, I think since God's given us a gift of rest in Sabbath, he's actually commanded it in the Big Ten, that he enjoys those things with us, And so I've had to look at, it's not just about me stopping doing things and being bored. That's actually kind of scary to me. I don't want to be bored. It's about, what do I love to do that I don't normally take time to do? What refreshes my spirit? What restores my soul? What recreates life in me? Those are the types of things that I've learned to do on rest and an abiding time that really do produce a lot more fruit. I feel really convicted right now too, because that's not what we're really doing. We've kind of gotten a little out of rhythm of this. So this is really helpful for me to be able to see this with you guys. All right. Give some thoughts on that, or input on that.
Well, you mentioned the fishing trip.
Yeah.
Out there. And for me, while I was out there, I felt refreshed. But in the same token, as I was catching fish, I was like, why can't I catch men like this?
Ooh, not great.
I'm like, why can't I have a season of abundance like this? Why can't I catch men and women like I'm doing right now? And so and if you're dip netting and you're catching as many fish as I was within that period of time, you get tired, but it's like you're seeing fruit. You're like, it's okay. I'll rest some other time. But yet this morning, I am out there fishing, not dip netting, but pole fishing for the same type of fish, different location, and I'm not getting anything.
Yeah.
And this is not refreshing me.
Yeah.
This is not restoring me. I'm with a guy that, if you see that picture, a guy that I've known for over 20 years, I was in the Marine Corps with, and just trying to speak into his heart, But when I look at those two examples of catching fish, where I see like, man, I'm in this. It's almost as tired. It's just as tiring catching nothing as it is catching something.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, I think so, and I think that's another way of saying some of what Emily was saying. She was saying it earlier on call for our book club, and I hear her say it again. I want to see fruitfulness, and I want to see the kingdom of God come now the way the Bible describes it. And it's frustrating that I don't see it at the same level that I want to, and I want to see it now. And I think in some ways I see some connections in what you guys are saying there. All right, well, let's turn from here and let's look at these questions and kind of work through a Kairos. I think I've got them queued up here. All right. 6 questions. You guys know the routine. We'll read through them, kind of digest it, make sure we're on the same page of understanding, and then we'll take it to the Lord and see if there's any one that stands out above the rest, and then we'll work the circle. So number 1, does my life demonstrate genuine concern for the lost, broken, and oppressed people around me? 2, am I being a person of peace to those who are outside of Jesus' family? 3, am I investing in the people of peace who are open and responsive to me? 4, am I building a family on mission that exists for more than just itself? 5, am I living in intentional and consistent rhythms of abiding and bearing fruit? And 6, does my family practice a weekly Sabbath day of rest? All right, take those to the Lord. Choose one. If you have to explain to me why these two are connected together specifically for you, that's okay, but let's choose one, all right? Father, come, use these questions to help us to grow. Take about a minute's time. All right. I could go a couple of ways. I'll choose one. I think number 4, am I building a family on mission that exists for more than just itself? And the answer really right now is no. I've got places where they're in early stages, but because of just things really shifting and changing in my life, it's like a restart in a lot of ways. So I think this is some of the stuff that I'm thinking about, that we're thinking about. Who's the family that we're running with for this next season of life? And then there's different spheres of it. Pacific Coast Collective, I see as a developing family on mission. It's probably further along than others. But then I'm primarily thinking locally. Who is that family locally that we're running with? That family on mission. Emily, what about you? Which one of these questions is getting your attention?
I think for sure 5 and 6 for me, just looking at the rhythms in our life right now as a family are they're skewed. Just even yesterday, I was just feeling conviction, just sitting here thinking about sacrificing yesterday. Hold on, baby. You did. I'm sorry. Okay. Sacrificing time with our family because we were busy for something I thought, but this person was so right. I had to go spend time with this person on a day that was typically a day we would spend in an abiding time and the rest of the family. So just recognizing that and feeling convicted. I usually remember we're on mission as a family in doing this as well.
That's good. JR, what about you? Which one of these is catching your attention? You're on mute right there. Okay.
Yeah, I'm having to work on the iPad, and it's a little bit different. And if I bring up one thing, it won't bring up the other. So I was trying to look for the question. So, I'll stay on the same sheet of music as Emily. Those last two there, and when it's like I'm doing those. I think it's question number 5 or 6. Which one is the one that says consistently?
Yeah, consistent is 5. Am I living in intentional and consistent rhythms of abiding and bearing fruit? Consistent.
Okay, so I'm in a rhythm, but it's kind of like the rhythm of the kid that's on the dance floor that's so out of rhythm. Is like, come on, this is the beat. Come on, get with the beat. Get with the beat.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm that kid right now. You know, I mean, I may be achieving some of those things, but I'm not in sync, and it seems like I'm consistently out of sync. And so that's where that, for me personally, resonates. That
Yeah.
So I'm going to stick with that one, because I definitely care for people lost. I have that food bank right outside. They're coming into the office and saying, "Pastor," you know. So and they can tell I'm not just kicking them to the curb. But that last one, being in a rhythm,
Yep.
that's a good rhythm, you
Yep.
know, that people will say, "Oh man, that dude's smooth."
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, it's so funny, JR. You know what's coming to mind while you say all this about rhythm and like the kid that can dance? I'm
Yeah.
being in New Orleans. There we are, all of us in New Orleans, Emily, and this like street performer is like calling people out. He calls out JR, and JR's dancing. He's got these moves, but he calls out our friend Lloyd Moritz, and he dances like the most like he's fully committed too. I appreciated it, but he's like just out of rhythm white guy, and it was so
Girl
fun.
that was right in front of me. She goes, "He's really white." I'm like, "He's a good guy."
Oh, but by the time you said, "I want to live a life that's like smooth," I was thinking about like, oh man, there's JR. He's got his moves going on. But yep, I hear you. Let's dig in. Emily, let me turn to you. Conviction about sacrificing time with family, but out of rhythms that you've already developed. So maybe if you need to, focus on the conviction side of it. But here's what I hear. We've taken lots of steps, and now I can course correct and see that because we've got ground back behind us. It's not a huge, like, it didn't derail you. So kind of unpack that. And then I think what I want to hear too is like, what are those rhythms? How are they shaped up now that you guys are this many months into ministry?
About how those rhythms have,
like, how are they doing for you guys right now?
yeah, awesome. So yeah, when we were more in sync, we just kind of switched our days around right now, but it's been, instead of me feeling guilt or like Will feeling guilt for like if there's something that God has placed on our heart ministry wise that we need to go and do, as opposed to this like, oh, you know, I don't want to, you know, leave you hanging here with, you know, it has opened the door to like, no, we're required. That's a requirement of us to go and do, and we can have open conversations about the things that God is doing in and through our desire to go and do those things, and know that there's going to be a day, and it typically is on that day of rest as a family, where we're able to like relax and unpack and celebrate. Hey, this is the things that God has been doing in and through, you know. Yeah, and so it's just, it's ministry is done out of a means of like a desire to do it and want to talk about it as a family, as opposed to just this thing we're kind of randomly doing throughout the week and then trying to throw everything together as a family at the end.
Yeah. So a couple of things I'm hearing. One, we've agreed on it together. We've got a plan. It's currently in transition. I get that. So that's a huge win right there. And that's good to hear that when it was in place was really helpful, because you both, because I think I heard you say we didn't have to struggle feeling guilty. Like, no, we actually were doing something at that time, and it's really important. It just doesn't look like this other form of busyness. And so I think that's really good to be able to hear. And then you just talked about then we can be together in the ways that we need to be together without having to, you know, keep saying yes to other things. I think that's really good. Is there anything anything further to address kind of about that? Am I missing anything, or?
I think for me, I'm just one, recognizing, readjust, but then two, reminding out of what is the fruit, out of what are these things coming from. Just remembering that as well. Yeah.
Good. Well, I think with that readjust is, you guys, and I think that's what I want to encourage you with. You know how to do this, but you're in a transition season. So give grace, and there is grace for a transition season, and it might not work out well, but that's to build on the strengths you guys already have developed that way. And then on that second one, I do think that's a good word. It sounds like what I've been hearing you say in the last 2 weeks, actually, that my strength comes out of my rest. That's at least the shorthand version of it. And as I refocus on that, here's where all of that comes from. I keep getting the sense, and I can't tell if it's me wanting you to unpack it further for us and so that JR can hear it, or if there's something in it, but that guilt thing and saying no, I think that's what it really comes down to. Like, it's hard to say no to needs that people present. And I think look at that text. This is like verse 42 and 43. The crowd searched everywhere for him. When they finally found him, they begged him not to leave them. They begged him not to leave him, but he replied, no. I mean, that's the shorthand version. He says no. And I think sometimes it's hard for us to equate that no can be a form of love, and it may be no is the word of love to them, or it may be no is love because I love my Father and I'm going to be obedient to him versus be obedient to this need that's calling me into it. And that, oh man, that's hard stuff to work out. So is that something for you, or is that something that you could just address for us and it would be helpful to hear from you?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I feel like, yes, it's for me in the sense that I think this will always be, always. But I'm aware, I think I'm aware of that. And I think too, that idea of only doing what I see the Father doing. Like Jesus said, I only do what I see the Father doing. And just, if I don't hear his voice, we don't hear his voice in it, then we're not doing what he's doing. So
awesome. Well, good. But I think then I just want to commend you guys on what you guys have done. I remember when you first started developing these rhythms and it was hard, and saying no was a hard thing. And so I thought, wow, that's really cool. In this report out, here you are saying, I felt convicted because we did say yes to something and we sacrificed time with family for these other needs. But it's an easy course correction now, not this regular repeated thing. So that's awesome stuff. Give us, how about, let's get real nuts and bolts. So that a good accountability can happen. What do you need? Let me start with this question. Like, what's the rhythm going to be? The adjusted rhythm going to be? Do you guys already have that stated, or do you need to make plans to get time with Will to figure out what that adjusted weekly rhythm is going to look like?
What? I'm sorry. You mean like?
Yeah, your weekly rest. Have you guys work that out together?
Yes, that's what needs to be corrected. Is our weekly rest?
Yep.
Yeah, and something that is refreshing and not just.
Yep.
Nothing, but actual refreshment that comes out of it that can produce something.
That's what I'm getting at. So have you and Will already had the conversation? And I'm going to make them a day. Wednesday is going to be our day for weekly rest, or is that just something that you're thinking right now? But the next step is really to have the conversation with Will about when will we do this and how will we do this.
We've had that conversation in establishing what the day is going to be, because our schedules have now switched where we have weekends off now, because he's a teacher. It's just a matter of, hey, this is now the day. We need to make sure that we make that happen, that becomes the day.
What would be the best form of accountability, like, as you work this stuff out? Is it best just to give us a report back in a couple of weeks at how a couple of weeks have been? What would be the best thing for you?
Yeah, probably just hold me accountable for that we've done that. And maybe even, what we've done as a means of refreshment. Because I could just tell you. Lucy's hungry? I think she's okay, honey. Thank you. I feed her. Okay, you feed her.
I missed
what's that?
I missed the last part because of Lucy. So report back 2 weeks from now, and then what we did.
Yeah, what has come? Like, what have we done to bring refreshing, and not just like rest, not just doing nothing, but like what is actual intentional.
Okay. Would you mind putting to like a reminder, maybe however you do reminders, maybe in your phone or something like that, to share with us 2 weeks from now when we get together, how it's worked out and then what you guys did? I think that would be really helpful for us to hear and will help us to grow, let alone be the good accountability step for you. All right, thanks. JR, how about as I turn back to you, I wanted to kind of like use Emily's example because I know there were a couple of things that maybe there were patterns of rhythms that you could see in there. What does it seem like what's the takeaway to get into rhythm for you? Like what will you do, or maybe what's the next step to begin to take some steps to get yourself into rhythm?
I think sometimes, I don't know how to say this, other than if you're not listening to a song that you can get in a rhythm with, then you'll never get in rhythm with it. You know what I mean? If you're playing some type of, I'm just using like some type of helter skelter type, if you're surrounding yourself in the wrong environment, or if you're not surrounding yourself with the right things to allow yourself to be in the correct rhythm, then that's a piece. I think for me, that's like, this stupid little phone, and playing card games and stuff. I mean, it's ridiculous, and so there's that piece for me. Anyway, so that's just an example. But I'm just saying that there's things that I need to let go of so I can.
Good. That's beautiful language.
So that way I can get on rhythm. I can get on. So.
Yep. If you would then, if you're up for this, you decide if this is helpful, maybe take some time, because I know time pressure and I've got somebody waiting up for an appointment down below, but maybe think through what's one thing that I can stop right now, and then one thing that I can start. And that's kind of where I hear you already going in that direction. And then either text it to me if that's the way that you would like, or send it in a reply all back in the email. But that might be a good way to be able to take some action steps in there and introduce some rhythm that way.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right. Bye.